Hello and welcome to How to Engage Customers with Purpose. My name is Fiona Rass-Jones. I'm the founder of Make Impact. We're an agency working with growing companies who want to lead with purpose and make their business a force for good. We help organisations to create authentic purpose, measurable impact, and opportunities for growth and innovation. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Amy Williams, founder of Goodloop. They are a leading ad tech company and BeCorp with a mission to make advertising a force for good in the world. They convert media money into charitable donations in a way that delivers positive user experience and guarantees high quality impressions for brands including Unilever and H&M. Amy is a UN Woman Global Innovator, one of Forbes 30 Under 30, Ad Age's 2020 Woman to Watch, Drum Digerati and a Beamer 100. Amy, lovely to have you joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great, so we're going to get started with an introduction to the topic. We'll then move on to an interview with Amy. Amy will then present on the how to engage customers with purpose part. We'll then have questions and answers from you, the audience. So it'd be great if you want to add any questions that you might have in the comments. Then we'll be moving on to that, and we'll finish with 3 key top tips on how to get started. So I'm going to get started with an introduction to the topic. I'll just share my screen. So customers' expectations of companies has changed in light of COVID-19, the Black Lives Matter movement, and an increased awareness of social inequality and climate change. So much so that in a recent Edelman Brand Trust in 2020 report, they found that 80% of people want brands to solve society's problems. And there's a lot more studies and surveys demonstrating that people are wanting to buy from brands that are making a difference. And companies are taking action. They're making public statements of support, giving donations to good causes, they're changing their internal practices, they're delivering social purpose and adopting social purpose into their organisation, changing their business models, and some are taking a whole company approach to doing business for good. So purpose, what is it? It's what your company is for beyond making profit. There are lots of different definitions available. One of my favourites is this one from the Social Purpose Institute, which is a purpose-led business is a company whose enduring reason for being is to create a better world. It's an engine for good, creating societal benefits by the very act of conducting business. Its growth is a positive force in society. Now, to bring this to life, I've shared a few examples of those companies that are doing this, that have adopted a business purpose, and they include Unilever, whose purpose is to make sustainable living commonplace. Ella's Kitchen, the children's food brand, is to improve children's lives through developing healthy relationships with food. WeTransfer is making creativity easier for everyone. And Tesla is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. So who is doing it? There's a growing movement of organisations that are adopting purpose and using it to engage their customers. Here's just a few as examples of organisations that are leading the way. They include Unilever and Ella's Kitchen, as I mentioned. We're also looking at companies like Patagonia, Brewdog, WeTransfer, Yoti, I know that you're on the call, Ken, Tom's, and of course Goodloop. And this isn't just the right thing to do. Oh, I might go back. Yeah, this isn't just the right thing to do. There's now a strong business case to do it. This is a great example of Unilever's 28 purpose-led sustainable living brands who are growing 69% faster than the rest of the business and delivering 75% of the company's growth. And there's a lot more studies and examples which are showing these business benefits that include things like engaging staff, access to new markets, innovation, having a competitive edge, investment and growth. In the session today, we're going to be focusing on engaging customers with purpose, looking at how to build trust, create customer loyalty, and access new markets. I'm very pleased to be welcomed by Amy Williams, the founder of Good Loop, and we're going to explore this in more detail. Amy, I wanted to start if you can tell us more about your business and why you started it.
Yeah, sure. So my company is called Good Loop. We are an ethical advertising platform. And what that means is we distribute adverts across the web. And if people choose to give a little bit of time and a little bit of attention, then in exchange, they unlock a free donation funded by the advertiser, and they can give it to a charity of their choice. So in a nutshell, we use advertising money to fund charities around the world whilst delivering better results for the advertiser.
Brilliant. And why did you start it?
Well, I started it because I worked in advertising. I worked at Ogilvy, so I knew the industry well. And I'm just a stereotypical millennial that wanted to have some purpose in my life. And I think there was I came to a crossroads where I either had to sort of start again and retrain as a doctor to save lives, or I could harness the industry I knew and use it as a force for good. And I think there's so much influence and opportunity within advertising, right? It's an industry that's worth $600 billion globally. We shape purchase decisions, we shape culture, we shape a huge amount about how our society operates. And we also fund the free internet. And an ad in a bus shelter keeps your head dry when you're waiting for the bus, right? Like, there's a value exchange between advertising and society that is inherently very exciting, and I wanted to tap into that potential to do some good.
Brilliant. And why do you think customers want businesses to be doing good for society?
I think, well, there's a huge opportunity in it, right? It's a commercial imperative. I think there's an author, Afdal Aziz, who wrote a book called Good is the New Cool. And he always says corporate social responsibility has changed to corporate social opportunity. The extent to which you can leverage social impact and social values as a key differentiator amongst your customers is growing rapidly. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in my presentation, but I think there's so much more mainstream conversation about the big issues that affect our world, right? From climate change to Black Lives Matter, and helping consumers to express their beliefs and to engage in the things that matter to them. That's a really big part of the role that brands play in our lives.
I think people really recognise the power that brands have as well to affect change, and are just seeing so much that needs to be done. If there's ways that they can be engaging and helping that, then all for the good. What are your reflections on consumer changes as a result of COVID and the Black Lives Matter movement and the responses that brands are making as a result of that?
I mean, it's been 10 years worth of conversations in 6 months. We've all been forced to really reevaluate a lot of what matters to us. I think initially when the lockdown happened, it was a scary time for all of us, and it changed really fundamental parts of our life. Like, our offline lives became increasingly isolated. Our online lives became a real source of community and family and support. There was a really interesting study by Kantar that looked at share of time spent across a day across a couple of markets. I think they looked at like 7 markets. They studied sort of 7,000 respondents, and they found that the sort of real shifts in the way people are consuming media and the way people are spending their time. Consumption of video became the top activity, followed by sleep, perhaps worryingly, followed by online education, online courses, and all of these things that were once such a small part of our day became huge. So in the really immediate sense, it changed advertising because it changed how we talk to consumers. It changed where consumers were, and therefore it meant that brands had to move to be relevant and to be present. So we saw a huge amount of shift of spend away from out-of-home media, away from sports sponsorship, onto online platforms, onto the trusted news sites that were giving us really crucial information. The New York Times reported highest subscriber levels ever. The Guardian live blogs had record numbers of traffic in the months of March to June. People are really flocking to those trusted news sites at a time of uncertainty. And then at a bigger level, I think where we were all collectively scared and anxious and upset, it's also driven a real expression of kindness and community support and altruism. The rainbows in the windows, the 750,000 people that volunteered to help the NHS in less than a week, right? Like there's just this real sense of like collective action and everyone wanting to muscle in. And so brands in that context have to step up. There was a website called didtheyhelp.com. You can still go to it, it's live now, didtheyhelp.com. And it's literally a crowdsourced resource where you can see any brand or any influencer or celebrity, and it will crowdsource information on their contribution during the crisis. Did they support their employees? Did they protect their customers? Did they use their production lines to make hand sanitizer? Like the things that the brands did to help society were a huge part of the conversation over the last 6 months. And then we're locked in our homes, we're locked in our screens, and we see awful things happen to Black people in the US and around the world. And it created this catalyst of a conversation that's been going on for years, but a conversation that suddenly captured a global attention. And in the month of May, the hashtag Black Lives Matter was tweeted 3.7 million times a day. Like wow. the scale of the anger that people felt was phenomenal, and that triggered a really introspective conversation about the role that advertising plays in fueling hate and misinformation, the role that advertising plays in funding the underlying forces that caused so many of these communities to be misrepresented, unheard, underestimated, undervalued. So we saw over 1,000 companies boycott Facebook in the month of July, which was a really powerful statement, perhaps not for the Facebook bottom line, but it did drive a global step back, a global moment of pause, where rather than take Facebook as the absolute default option for our advertising, we think a little bit more about the role it plays in society and the thing it says about our brand by association. So it's been an incredible few months. I've been very busy.
And you talked a bit about trust and loyalty with that in relation to brands. I mean, how do you think trust is a major issue? It's falling across the board, across institutions. I mean, how do you think that brands have responded in a good way to try to build that trust and loyalty?
So I think that there's so many countless studies that really emphasize this relationship between trust and purpose. One that came out recently is the Zeno Strength of Purpose study. It was announced in June of this year. They research across 8 different markets, so it's a truly global perspective on the role that purpose plays. And they looked at purchase decisions. And 2 stats that really stood out for me. They found people were 4 times more likely to purchase a brand that had a strong purpose and 6 times more loyal. And by loyalty, they really dug into that. And what that means is loyal in the sense of happy to advocate for the brand, happy to recommend the brand to friends, happy to forgive if the brand makes mistakes, which obviously is crucial, especially at a time when there's so many politically sensitive issues that we're all sort of chewing over and struggling to get our heads around. We're going to make mistakes. So having consumers that are with you for the long haul, it is a really big part of the role that purpose plays in building equity in a business.
And kind of linking to that as well, on the flip side, we've also seen quite a bit of purpose wash happening as well, and brands trying to take action but being criticised for that. Can you speak a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I'm never sure about this phrase purpose wash. I mean, I get greenwashing, right? Like greenwashing is a very explicit thing. It's where a fossil fuel company is polluting our rivers and our skies and killing our planet whilst also funding theatres. That's greenwash, because that's where you're using purpose as purely a distraction tool to say, don't look over there where we're killing the planet. Look over here where we've got this lovely play we funded. Like it's a very explicit thing, and it's malevolent. Purpose often comes from a place of wanting to build a brand that matters to people, and purpose doesn't need to be grandiose. I think that's where a lot of companies fall down is, Pepsi tried to stand for activism. Like Pepsi tried to stand for like youth-driven global societal change, and that was always going to backfire on them because they're a busy drink. Like their voice in that is not authentic. There's a really lovely example I often use, which is PG Tips. So PG Tips are a tea brand, and tea is never going to save the world. They have certain responsibilities as a business, like they have to ensure that they source their tea responsibly. They have to ensure they don't use child labour. They have to ensure certain fair trade principles within their sphere, their operational sphere of influence. Once those hygiene factors are fixed, the PG Tips purpose is actually about loneliness. Their purpose is actually about how when you have a cup of tea and you sit down with someone and you chat, you don't feel so alone. And that is such a tiny little moment in a person's life, and it's such a tiny thing in the global context of all the terrible issues we're trying to fix. But it's also really powerful, and it's something that they can authentically have an impact in. So they've partnered with charities like the Samaritans. They work really closely with lots of different mental health charities. They have tea days. They fund tea, like virtual tea chat. Like they've really embodied this idea of just sit and have a cup of tea with someone, and will help slowly combat loneliness. I just think it's a really lovely example of how purpose doesn't need to be grandiose for it to really have an impact.
And I think, you mentioned authenticity there as well. I think that that's when brands are open to criticism, when it's not authentic, and when there's, that they're obviously trying to state one thing and doing something else. And I think I've been really inspired by brands who've kind of said they want to stand for something, but also have admitted and kind of owned up to the things that they are doing wrong, with an intention to change. And I think that that's really important for people to see that behind the brand as well. Building trust is really important, and one of the ways to do this is through independent certification. Your organisation is a B Corporation. Can you tell us a bit more about that, about what a B Corp is and your experience of becoming one?
Yeah. So we've been a B Corp for about a year now, and it's something I'm genuinely really proud of. It's essentially it's a set of principles and standards that you sign up to, and you have to commit to be fully transparent and to bake these ethical and sustainable principles into your legal articles of association. So you legally have to change the business. And what this really means at a fundamental level is that me and the other directors of the company are now legally responsible to operate the business in the benefit of shareholders and stakeholders. So not only do we have to make profit, but we also have to protect our community, our workers, our environment, our society. And those responsibilities have legally been applied at the same level of importance as profit within our business. What that means on a practical level is we're certified across a range of different metrics, from how we treat our workers to our environmental footprint and our packaging, our supply chain. And you just have to basically have a fully transparent audit. At the end of that audit, you get a score, and if that score is over a certain threshold, you receive B Corp certification, and you have to renew it. So you can't just get it once and then go back to your old dodgy dealings. It's something that you have to really actively commit to.
Brilliant. And so can you tell us a bit more about how you work with and support your clients to consider how they might use purpose to engage their clients?
Yeah, so we work with a range of different clients, and their purposes are also different, and they're at different stages of the journey as well. For instance, we worked with H&M, and they have a conscious collection where they ethically source all the materials, and they ensure to replace any water that's used through the production process. H&M as a whole company have a lot of things to fix, but this particular range is their sort of first attempt at that. And I think as a business, we were really keen to help amplify and support that effort. So for this particular range, they knew it was about sort of sustainability messaging. They knew they wanted to talk to that sort of millennial audience of early 20s, early 30s, sort of with a little bit of disposable income, with clear social values. And they had a very specific campaign they wanted to run. They didn't know what charities to support. And so we consulted with them. We sourced charities that we felt would align with their target audience and also would amplify their own values and their own sustainability messaging. We went for a range. So we had things like the Woodland Trust, who obviously plant trees around the UK as a much more local impact driven initiative, and then also things like WaterAid and WWF as some of the more global sustainability charities. So we ran that campaign. Every time you watch the WWF ad without pressing that tempting skip button, you unlock a donation funded by WWF, and you could choose which of those charities to support. What we found was that WWF was by far the most popular choice, outpaced the other charities by quite a distance. So we went back to them and actually developed that relationship further. So rather than, in our next campaign, rather than feature 3 different charities, we decided to purely support WWF, but the user could choose which project they wanted to fund, whether it was turtle nest mapping or the Amazon fire appeal or their work with schools and youth programs. So actually really digging deeper on the impact story behind what the WWF do. And I think that's a really lovely example of how we can kind of help evolve a company's purpose and help engage consumers in that journey.
I think it is a journey as well, like you mentioned. It's like, you know, you can't do it all at once, you know, just like one day to the next. And I think that's where some companies struggle. It is a journey and it's a process, and it's about, yeah, testing and exploring that. But that's a brilliant example. Thank you, Amy. So we're going to move on now to hear from Amy and her presentation in the kind of how to do it. And while Amy's giving her presentation, if you would like to type questions in the comments, then after we'll see how much time we've got in terms of how many we can ask, but we'll go for that from there. So Amy, over to you.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Let me know when you can see what I see.
That's great.
Okay. Cool. So I'm going to speak for 10 minutes or so just on how to engage customers with purpose, and talk a little bit about some of the sort of societal forces that shape this role of purpose in business. I always like to start with this image. It's such a fantastic illustration of how having an impact, having a voice, having a point of view about the issues that matter has become part of the mainstream. You know, this is a 15-year-old Swedish schoolgirl being treated like the rock star she is because she's talking about something that truly matters. And this idea of good is the new cool, I can't take credit for it. It's a book written by Abdelaziz and Bobby Jones. I highly recommend you read it. And it talks about how ethics and social principles have been baked into so many of the brands that are successful today. If you think about some of the world's coolest brands, some of the brands that are most exciting, fastest growing, most innovative, most engaged with younger youth audiences, so many of them have a really clear reason to exist above and beyond selling more widgets. A couple of examples from the book, obviously Patagonia being a really iconic purpose-driven brand. Tesla, a really innovative tech company that's purpose is all about shifting society away from fossil fuels and onto electric. And so that idea of like Warby Parker, the 1-for-1 model, when you buy a pair of glasses, they give a pair of glasses to a person in need. And not being able to have access to glasses can really impact a person's ability to learn and to work. So there's a real story of social mobility that comes from the work that Warby Parker do. So to kind of think about this idea of good is the new cool, I think it's also fair to say that Beyonce is pretty cool, right? And she's used her global influence and her platform to give a voice to the Black Lives Matter movement and become an iconic member of the Black Lives Matter movement. She is an example of a celebrity who cares. Another would be Lady Gaga with her work on mental health, or Leonardo DiCaprio has been banging on about the environment for who knows how long. I love this sentiment that's been really perfectly articulated by Megan Rapinoe here. She was named by FIFA as the Player of the Year of 2020, maybe 2019. And in her acceptance speech, she had this quote: "Lend your platform to lift people up." And I just think that's such a perfect articulation of how we see celebrity culture and brand culture as a force to make change happen. But what does this mean for the individual, right? So, the average Joes like you and me who don't have a global platform. Well, it means that a lot of us are going to the streets. A lot of us are finding our voice. In 2019, Pinterest found that protest posts grew by 6th Like, that's an incredible statistic. The thought that we can go out on the streets and march and have our voice heard is something that's no longer sidelined. It's something that's really, really mainstream and very commonplace. And another way that we do it is through the brands we buy. When I wear my Patagonia backpack and my Tom's shoes, I'm choosing those brands because of what they say about me. I'm choosing those brands because I believe that the climate crisis is real, and I buy into brands that are actively tackling the climate crisis. Brands have always played that role in our lives, right? If you think about like Business School 101, the role of a brand is twofold. Step one is trust and reliability, and step two is self-expression. We used to buy brands that said that we were glamorous, or said that we were rich, or said that we were cool. Now we buy brands that say we're good. And we take action through brands. Talking about going on the streets and protesting, another way that we can take action is through our wallets. I love that quote, every pound you spend is a vote for the world you want to live in. And it's so true. When I stand in the supermarket aisle and I can buy Heinz baked beans or I can buy Branston baked beans, firstly, I don't buy Branston because I'm not a sicko, but also I know that Heinz work with Magic Breakfast. I know that they have a partnership. They fund children's meals, free breakfasts around the UK. They've done 12 million free breakfasts during COVID. And this is actually a campaign that Goodly worked with them on, helping support Magic Breakfast through their video marketing. And it's such an important part of a kid's day. There's so many studies that show when a kid has a good breakfast, they have better learning outcomes. So that's really why, when we say that we've talked about this a little bit already, but we talk about that idea of purpose driving commercial results. When you do good, you sell more soap, you sell more baked beans. I've talked already about the Zeno Strength of Purpose study, but there's countless studies that show this. It really does drive long-term purchase intent and loyalty, and those are the metrics that truly matter. So for the last few minutes, I just wanted to explore how we can empower people to do good with their wallets. And this is BeCorp is such a perfect example of this. BeCorp is a way that you can help give people information about the work your business is doing. And empowerment and choice has to start with information, right? If a consumer has all the information about how different companies are operating in society, they can decide their purchase decisions based on their values. So, as I've already mentioned, Goodly is a B Corporation, and we have signed this Declaration of Interdependence as well as changing our Articles of Association. And I love how they've articulated it here, so I'm just going to read a little bit of it. We envision a global economy that uses business as a force for good. As B Corporations and leaders of this emerging economy, we believe that we must be the change we seek in the world. We believe that all businesses ought to be conducted as if people and place mattered. And through our products, practices, and profits, businesses should aspire to do no harm and benefit all. Now that sounds so obvious, right? The thought that businesses should be a vessel to improve humanity is literally the reason we started having commerce, right? It's the fundamental point of business is to economically empower people. But so often you see businesses that are purely a vehicle for personal wealth and that don't contribute to society. When Mike Ashley decides to send all his poor workers into his shops during a global public health crisis because he believes that fresh trainers are a crucial item during lockdown, like that is an example where business is purely being used to drive personal profit. And that is not what businesses are about. So I know this stuff sounds simple, but it actually is really important to say, because this is a really important part of the B Corp promise. So when you become a B Corp, you actually have to commit, and you very transparently and publicly have your scorecard available. So if you go on the B Corp website, you can search their directory and you can see exactly how Goodleaf has scored. If you click on any of these areas, you can see exactly how Goodleaf has scored on our governance, our environmental impact, our community support. You can see brands like Patagonia, who are obviously whipping our ass in terms of their stats, but we're still working on it. And then you've got some really giant companies. Danone is the biggest B Corp in the world, a fantastic achievement for a global corporation like Danone to become a B Corp. And then even publications. So The Guardian is the first global news network to become certified as a B Corporation. So I'd really urge you, if you need a photographer or an illustrator or an agency, or you want to buy a packet of crisps, whatever it is, a lawyer, there's B Corps across all sectors. So I'd really urge you to just quickly pop onto the B Corp directory and first and foremost, see if you can flow your money through a B Corporation business, because it's a really easy way that you can make ethical and more impactful decisions. Okay, I was briefed to make this a very practical session, so I'm going to end with some really practical ways that we can take action within the advertising industry. And I'm going to talk about it in a couple of different areas of impact, depending on where you work, right? So I've started with creative. So if you're in the creative team, if you're making adverts, if you're building brands, maybe your creative agency side or your brand side, or you own your business, if you're building a brand, you are also building a voice. And that voice can be used to drive positive change. I'd hope that advertising changes behavior. If it doesn't, we're all running around in like the Emperor's New Clothes situation, right? Like the advertising as an industry is built on the idea of driving purchase, changing behavior, and making people make decisions. So let's use that superpower for good. Let's promote positive behaviors. I've used this example here of Nivea. Nivea have committed to only show showers in their adverts, no baths. It's so simple, but it's creating those norms around sustainable living. There's other examples where brands have committed to never have plastic bags in their adverts. To ensure that you have a really diverse range of people cast in your adverts, to ensure that you show different social settings and different environments, to really be inclusive in your messaging. Starting to talk about electric cars or healthy eating. I have an example of this actually with Birdseye, which is a Good Loop client. They did a study, and they found that 95% of the food adverts that we are served are unhealthy. They're burgers and chips and chicken nuggets. So poor vegetables only get 5% of our share of voice. And Birdseye have really made it their mission to use more of their ad spend to ensure that we as a nation eat in full colour. So it's a campaign we worked on together. I'll just play that. I don't know if you guys can hear the sound, but
it's coming through all right for me. If anyone's got any issues with the sound, please. Oh no, we can't hear the video. Hear you loud and clear.
Oh well. Okay. Well, you'll have to trust me that it's a very lovely video of some vegetables singing. But the point is, it's an ad that's all about eating in full colour. Supporting their Steam Fresh range of veg, obviously a staple of the Birdseye portfolio. And as you can see, we wrapped it in the Good Loop unit, and every time you didn't skip and you watched the ad, you could unlock a donation to Veg Power, which funds initiatives around the world promoting healthy eating and getting more veg onto kids' plates. And the business impact results there in the bottom right corner. Through this campaign, 70% of people agreed that it was encouraging healthy eating. We also uplift the perception of healthy food and drove consideration for purchase. So by talking about those issues and shaping positive behaviors in society, we sold more stuff. The second practical thing, if you're in production, if you're making advertising, right? Think about how you can be more green in your production. Ad Green is a community, it's a sort of a volunteer community where they collate resources around making your production process as green as possible. Everything from like using paper cups to shooting on certain types of cameras and using certain types of film. It's well beyond my levels of understanding. This is not my area, but I know that Ad Green are very trusted in the industry as a consultative source of knowledge if you want to produce an ad in the most sustainable way possible. Another resource, MoFilm. So MoFilm are a distributed production house. So rather than fly your film crew to South Africa, through MoFilm you can recruit people on the ground, which means that you are recruiting more diverse people first and foremost, but you're also saving a huge amount of carbon. And diverse and inclusive voices, right? Like let's get more people in front and behind the camera who are from diverse backgrounds and have diverse experiences. Lensational is a fantastic organization. They're an NGO. They train women in remote communities to use photography. Well, they train women in photography. They then sell those women's photographs to advertisers through the Lensational platform, basically like Getty Images. And all of the royalties and rights from that imagery goes back to those women in those remote communities to economically empower them. So it's a fantastic example of a really social, sustainable business model that also brings their world, their voices into our advertising here in the UK. And finally, media. If you're buying media, if you're promoting advertising, then stop funding hate, first and foremost. Add sites to your block list that have been called out by the UN for spreading hate speech, the Daily Mail. Join the Conscious Advertising Network and subscribe to our 7 manifestos that talk about data security and protecting children, welfare, a whole host of different ways that media can be more positive. And as many advertisers did in the month of July, challenge Facebook and your other partners to better protect their users. And then once you're not funding hate, then maybe we can start funding good. Like, how can our ad money be a positive force in the world? How can we invest in media that is owned by diverse and minority groups to give them a voice and support those most affected by the hate and misinformation spread on other platforms? If you want to start somewhere, Brand Advance is a network of diverse publications you can buy through. Revise your block lists to ensure that you're enabling quality journalism. When you block the word COVID, when you block the word Black Lives Matter, your ads don't appear there, but your ad money also doesn't fund that journalism. And we need that coverage. And finally, work with Goodloop. I know I'm super biased on that one, but genuinely, the reason I started this business is to use advertising money as a force for good. So hit me up. Okay, I'm going to end with 3 practical tips to get you started now. 3 things you can literally do when you hang up this Zoom call. Step 1, download the BeCorp criteria and look at the BeCorp directory. If you need a service, check that there's a BeCorp that offers it and maybe see if they can accept the brief. And also the BeCorp criteria can be a really helpful starting point to see how you measure up. You don't have to go through the whole process. Just checking the criteria is a great way to see where you stand. Identify where you personally can have the most impact. Do you work in creative or in production or in media distribution, or perhaps you own the business and you work across it all and you can do the strategic stuff? Wherever you can have the most impact, just take a moment to reflect on that. And then once you've decided where you're going to focus, articulate a goal and find allies. That's the most important thing I've been able to do in running this business, is find people that believe in our mission and want to come along on the journey, because those allies, they can bring expertise, they can bring connections. They're people that can celebrate the wins with you and, commiserate the losses. And I think that community spirit is really how you kind of make change happen. So I hope that's super useful. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for that, Amy. That was incredible. Your wealth of knowledge and examples are really inspiring. Oh, I think we've still got your presentation up on, there we go, perfect. Thank you. So we've had some really interesting questions while you've been talking, so I'm going to go through a few of those now. First of all, from Nick Wayne, we've got, do you think the UK is suffering from helpfulness fatigue due to government sending mixed messages and not getting the general public on their side?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, do you think the UK is suffering from helpfulness fatigue due to the government sending mixed messages and not getting the general public on their side?
What's helpfulness fatigue?
I am guessing, Nick, I don't know if you want to add anything into the comments.
Help me out, Nick. What are we talking about?
Add a bit, tell you what, Nick, if you want to add a little bit more about that, I'll go on to the next question. So the next one's from Ken Banks, and it's what's the best example of purpose done badly that you can think of, and what's your all-time favourite?
Purpose done badly. Oh man, what's the best example? I mean, I've got in my head that Pepsi one because I mentioned it earlier, and now I can't think of anything else. So the Pepsi one is pretty bad, actually. So maybe I'll just say that. They did an ad. It was in-house. It was sort of this really weird creative of this very glamorous protest shoot with Kendall Jenner, and she sort of gave the armed police a Pepsi, and they decided to not attack the peaceful protest. I don't really know. No one was really clear. It didn't really have anything that they were saying or standing for. It was just a bit of a emotional brand manifesto film. And I think that's the rub, is protest is done badly when it's just designed by a marketing or PR team with the intention of telling a story rather than with the intention of having an impact. It's almost like the brand equivalent of going volunteering just so that you can have the Instagram pictures. And that's so transparent when that happens. So it's just, if you're thinking about purpose and you want your business to be purposeful, then think about it as impact, not as a story.
Brilliant. And what was your favorite example of purpose done well?
There's Durex paint. No, is Durex the condoms? Oh God, what's the paint called?
Dulux. Yeah.
Durex has a purpose too, but I won't talk about that. Dulux, the paint, has a purpose around like paint, color and paint brings joy to a place. Like that's their sort of whole proposition, right? Like paint and color bring joy, and so they had this purpose around bringing joy to communities and like reinvigorating communities. So they created this platform where any community could enter and apply, and you'd send pictures of your space, be it a community, a library, a community center, a sports hall, whatever it is, and then they would send free paint and facilitate painting of the place. And it was a global campaign. It did particularly well in Brazil. There was all these fantastic results of like areas of these favelas that were getting painted up. And a lick of paint is like a phrase that we use, right? Like give it a lick of paint. Like it's the idea of just like rejuvenating and reinvigorating a space that's really important to a community. And it's kind of like the tea example, paint's not going to save the world, but it was a way that they could genuinely help. It was authentic to what their product does, and it was authentic to what their business stands for.
That's brilliant. And I've got another question from Nina Jackson, and she'd like to know, what other books would you recommend reading? So you mentioned Good is the New Cool, but
Yep.
What other suggestions?
Another book that I've really enjoyed recently is Factfulness by Hans Rosling. So Hans Rosling is a statistician and a public health expert. He worked very closely on the Ebola outbreak and looked at sort of the movement of people and the movement of the disease. And so he's got this fantastically sort of data-driven brain. And he's also got a really clear and on the ground experience of like where the world is at. He's been to the most depths of the most terrible experiences of humanity, and he's seen what's improved and what hasn't. And Factfulness as a book is really about how much better the world is than we think it is. And I think sometimes we all need that message, like we all see these terrible news stories and we all have like doom and gloom news cycles, or the terrible charity ad of the hungry child, and it all just gets a little bit overwhelming. But then he gives these like really cold hard facts, which is the number of people in extreme poverty in the last 10 years has halved. The number of girls in low-income countries that now finish primary school is at 60%, which is 10 times where it was 10 years ago. We are living in our greatest period of peace in human history. And these stats don't mean that we're done. It doesn't mean that like, cool, no need to worry anymore, everything's fixed. But it just means that we can focus our impact where it matters rather than getting distracted and emotional.
I think there's a big thing that a lot of this can feel overwhelming at times as well.
Yeah.
Feel almost like paralyzed in terms of taking action. But, those statistics you just mentioned are absolutely incredible. And it shows that we can make a difference and we are making the world better. And we need to get more people on board to continue that. So I have got a clarification from Nick on helpfulness fatigue.
Thanks, Nick. Sorry about that.
So it's a phrase he just made up, but essentially the whole country had commonality of cause in the early weeks of lockdown.
Yeah.
So 750,000 volunteers wanting to help the NHS, but now we're hearing and seeing the general public complaining about the situation and demonstrating frustration over government announcements.
Yeah. Helpfulness fatigue. I like it. Coined here. Heard it here first. It's going to be the word of 2021. It's so true. And I think that's it's just being constantly let down, isn't it? It's being that constant feeling of having empty promises. It's the same principles that drive any sort of purpose strategy. If it's hollow, if it's not backed up with action, then it will very quickly turn sour. And so I think I absolutely agree with you, Nick. I don't have much more to add. I think it's a really good point.
I think as well, that kind of going back to your last point, highlighting ways that a change is being made and that people can get on board and that we can collaborate and work together, you know, in relation to some of the examples you were giving as well of brands helping consumers take action, I think is really powerful. I feel like the fatigue comes in when it feels like it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Or people feel kind of over consulted or but I think demonstrating that change can happen and that we can do this together counteracts some of that. Maybe I'm an optimist. Well, I am an optimist, but there you go. So I've got another question for you, again, another one from Ken Banks. So how would you describe the difference between purpose and CSR, which for those of you who aren't aware, it's corporate social responsibility, and are they the same thing done differently?
Yeah, they are similar. I would say that CSR is, well, clues in the name, it's responsibility, right? CSR is about the things that you should do. CSR is the direct sphere of operational influence a company has, a footprint the company has. So if you're using packaging, it should be recyclable. If you're employing factory workers, they should be well paid. If you're sourcing in materials or ingredients, those should be sustainably and ethically sourced. Like those things are CSR. And so a lot of CSR will be about donating to charities that solve problems as well, you know, often explicitly linked to the business. So where, you know, an example of CSR would be Tesco. It was quite a UK reference. I don't know, quite an international audience, I think. But just as an illustration, Tesco is a supermarket and they have a really iconic partnership with cancer research. It's a partnership that's been sort of, I think it's 20 years old. It's tens of millions in value for cancer research. And, you know, it's about solving the problem of cancer. It's about Tesco using a little bit of their resource and their profits as they responsibly should, because they're a huge business that take a lot of our cash, to help solve a problem that affects all of us. Purpose is an evolution of that same sentiment, but it is the vision for the world, or the ambition that the business wishes to fulfill. Your purpose is like, what's the world you want to live in, and why is the world better because you're in it? So it's kind of taking a more proactive, more future focused perspective. I hope that's helpful.
I think that's a really good point. And yeah, it is an evolution. I think in terms of, you know, talking about it being a journey as well, sometimes brands might want to start with a kind of CSR approach and evolve it, but it's much more of a whole systems approach. So I've got, I'm going to ask one more question from the comments, which is from Yasmin Wentworth, which is, should UK brands follow the Scandinavian sustainability approaches and take note?
I don't know enough about Scandinavian sustainability, probably. I would definitely say they should be more sustainable. And yeah, I was in a forum yesterday, well, I was in a workshop yesterday with a load of brands trying to be more sustainable. And we had a guest speaker who does research into the associations with sustainability. And one of the big associations that they found was the more innovative people think a company is, the more sustainable people think the company is. So there's like this weirdly inherent link in consumers' minds between innovation and sustainability that I think, you know, it kind of comes back to that idea of like new brands today always have a purpose. Like, what is the point of building a tea brand today that doesn't do any good in the world? Like you kind of can't really build a brand anymore that doesn't have a purpose, because there's so many incumbents that already do that. You're really only going to cut through if you've got something interesting to say. And I think it's the same with sustainability. There's really no point in innovating and developing something new unless it's going to help the world get, you know, and I think that's, so yeah, sorry, I don't know enough about Scandinavian models, but I definitely think that this idea of sustainability as a route of innovation is quite an interesting way of thinking about it.
Great. So thank you everybody for your questions, and Amy for your brilliant responses there. So we're going to be wrapping up the session now. So Amy, do you just want to tell people how they can find out more about you and Good Loop and get in touch?
Yeah, so our website is www.good-loop.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn. I have one of the most common names in the UK, so you're going to have to Google it, Amy Williams Goodloop, to find me. But yeah, feel free to add me, or on the website, drop us a note. hello@goodloop.com. We'll get you through. If you're running campaigns and you'd like to explore how we could work together and support some good along the way, then get in touch.
Thank you. This session's been run by Make Impact, and if you'd like to find out more about leading with purpose and making your business a force for good, then get in touch. Our website is makeimpact.co.uk, or you can get in touch directly with me, which is fiona@makeimpact.co.uk. We really value your feedback, and we'd appreciate it if you'd be happy to fill in the feedback form. I've just added the SurveyMonkey link in the comments. And as a thank you, we'll be people who respond, we'll be sending out the resources from the session. So that's everything for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and have a lovely weekend. Take care.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.